بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Dear brother Nouman, I would like to start with thanking you a lot for assigning a part of your valuable time for us. So, Jazakallah khairan. I hope it
I
will
appreciate
be
that.
like fruitful, short conversation with you, inshallah.
Inshallah. Inshallah.
Actually, here we are in Turkey. We are curious about the circumstances, Ramadan, how it goes in the United States. So we have few questions. We would like to have conversation with you going around these questions.
Sure.
Okay. First of all, we know that Muslim community in the United States is highly diversified. But firstly, what makes Ramadan special in the US compared with the other parts of the world?
I think Ramadan in the US is pretty diverse experiences. So, because Muslims are spread all over the country, and there are some places in the country where Muslims are a very dense population, and we have a very concentrated community, and we have larger Islamic centers and Islamic spaces and Islamic markets and things like that. Alhamdulillah. Excuse me.
Alhamdulillah,
So,
Hamkumullah.
okay,
And
so but then there are other places where Muslims are a very, very small community, and there may be, 25 families in the entire town or something like that. So it is a diversified experience. So obviously, probably the ones to talk about more so are the larger communities, and even college campuses. A lot of students are on campuses. I
mhm,
think it's a really nice experience in Ramadan in the United States. It's and the masajid are full. There's lots and lots of iftars being held. There's lots of invitations of non-Muslims into the masajid. There's a lot
mhm.
of Islam awareness work going on inside the university campuses and even high
MashaAllah,
schools.
MashaAllah,
Yeah,
MashaAllah.
alhamdulillah. So I think
Alhamdulillah.
it's a nice time for um the community get-togethers kind of increase and ramp up also. Um so and we have, because I live in Dallas, which is kind of
Mhm,
is a
mhm,
very
mhm.
flourishing Muslim community. So you have a lot of choices.
MashaAllah.
So you can go,
Uh-huh.
we have some of the most incredible reciters, mashallah, from around the world. So you
MashaAllah.
get to hear beautiful Quran recitation in different, masajid. So it's a nice experience, alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. So talking about the university, and mashallah, we have seen the efforts by young people in the recent times, especially specifically what's happening in Palestine. They are
Right.
doing a great job. Mashallah, may Allah bless them. So my question is, how does the experience of Ramadan in the US contribute to the broader understanding and acceptance of Islam within the American society?
That again depends on the density of the Muslim population, but I think there's an increased awareness slowly but gradually. There's an increased awareness of the presence of Muslims, of Muslim culture, of Muslim values, of Muslim celebrations. And I think Ramadan certainly is a time to expedite that and to acknowledge that. There are some things that happen even at the governmental level, but they're minor.
Mhm.
When I went to places like Taiwan, I saw that there's a lot more governmental involvement. Like, for example, their national museum has a space for Muslims to pray. They have a musalla on the first floor in their national museum,
Mhm, mhm.
marked on the menu of the program of the museum, and they give their main central park away for Muslims to make their Salat al-Eid and set up their bazaars and things like that. That doesn't
Mhm.
typically happen in the US, but there's still quite a bit of accommodation, I think, for Muslims to have their prayers in open spaces, and um, sometimes in a sporting stadium, sometimes in an open park and field like that. So we are out in the open. Plus, there's a
Mhm.
lot of families like to get together and go to. I'm not sure if you guys have. I'm sure you have similar things, but theme parks like we have Six Flags and those crazy rides,
Uh-huh.
roller
Yeah, yeah,
coasters, things
yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
So the Muslim community in many cities will book out the entire place, and
Mm.
the whole day it's just Muslim kids and families just
Uh-huh.
running the place. So that happens quite a bit often here too. Plus the community opens up probably every year, every major community opens up some kind of a bazaar
Mhm.
uh approaching the nights of Ramadan. and that is a massive, massive place for people to hang out. Not just the Muslims, but also non-Muslims come and kind of see the festivities and things like that.
Okay, talking about the things you said, I would like to ask, and this was one of my questions actually, what initiatives or programs or activities do Muslim communities in the US organize during the month of Ramadan to foster the community spirit, you know, the brotherhood and this stuff? What type of programs, like things that we can maybe learn from you, we can apply here in Turkey? So
Uh,
programs, initiatives, this stuff. I'm sure
I
that
think it's kept rather light
had,
because because Ramadan is a time where it's also a really important time for personal worship, and it's also a really important time for families. So it's kind of trying to strike a balance between those things. So a lot of the masajid, for example, on the weekends, they'll hold massive iftars at the masjid so that community can get together and eat together. Those are pretty popular. Sometimes there's not even enough space, so they'll set up tents outside in the car park and parking lot, and hold iftars there, which is a nice communal experience. There's a lot of organizing of the Taraweeh prayer around halaqat. So you'll have a short halaqa after maybe Maghrib, a short one after Isha, and then get into the Taraweeh prayer, and then have a program after Taraweeh prayer, and a reminder and a lecture and things like that after Taraweeh prayer. There's a lot of educational activity, I think, that goes on during Ramadan. I think some circles even do daytime programs where they're, women and children and things like that. Those that have time off, they're even doing intense Quran study during the day. So that's kind of what the activities look like here.
That's amazing. Actually, I would like to ask about the Muslim communities in different states. I mean,
Okay.
I'm expecting that, for example, we have in this state majority of Muslims from a specific country. So, do we have like? Can you please talk about the unique cultural or regional variations of in how
Yeah.
Ramadan is celebrated or like lived during different Muslim communities in the United States?
So the more cosmopolitan, larger city centers like Los Angeles or San Francisco, or if you move further down, like towards the northwest, if you're looking at Seattle or you're looking at Minneapolis, and you're coming down towards Houston, Texas, or Dallas, Texas, or um basically the major city centers like New York, of course, Chicago, Miami, those places, they're very diverse. So you have people from all ethnicities kind of concentrated, and there's a really amazing mix of people in the masajid. But there are some communities that are very ethnically concentrated also. So
Exactly.
yeah, so you'll have a pretty sizable Afghan community, for example, and even a growing Kazakh community in California, in Southern California, among others. There are other communities there too, but they have a concentration also. The Minneapolis community is famously very, very dense with the Somali community. They're an amazing, vibrant community. Um, the place where I live in Dallas, our communities are a pretty good mix. So we have the African populations, we have the North Africans, we have the Indians, Pakistanis, Bangladeshis, the Turks. We have kind of everybody.
MashaAllah.
So and the
Together.
Indonesian, Malaysians. So it's a pretty diverse population, mashallah.
Good.
But it used to be, I think, earlier on, maybe 20, 30 years ago, that a lot of communities, they set up by ethnicity. So the Pakistanis had a Pakistani masjid, and the Bangladeshis had a
Yes.
Bangladeshi masjid. And
Yes.
some of that is still there in the inner cities in places like Chicago and New York and things like that. But for the most part, in the major city centers, we develop these suburban masjid experiences where basically it's everybody's masjid. And there's just generally a diverse population. And a lot of times what used to happen also is the khutbah and the halaqat and the culture was very focused on the local language, right? So it was a Bangladeshi masjid, everything was happening in Bangla, or Bengali. And if it's a Pakistani masjid, everything's happening in Urdu. And there's an Indonesian community or Malaysian community, everything's happening in Bahasa, Indonesia, or Bahasa Malayo, etc. But then, and of course the Arab community, everything's in Arabic. but that's
Yeah.
changed. That's changed in the major city centers. That's changed. There's a recognition that the language of the majority and the language of the youth, especially,
Mhm.
and of course, the language of people that are interested in Islam is English. So
Yeah.
there's a lot more presentation and a lot more education going on with an emphasis on the universal, the common language, which is English.
Mhm.
While what's interesting in some really forward-thinking communities, I personally think that America, with all of its positives, one of its negatives is that people lose their original culture, right? So in two
Yeah.
generations or even in one generation, kids
Mhm.
don't speak the parents' language well at all. They may understand some of it, but they don't speak it well at all.
Exactly.
And that, to me, that's a tragedy. I think that Muslims should, as important as it is to learn Arabic, they should be retaining their
Mhm.
heritage languages, right? Um,
Exactly.
so one of the cool things that's happened is some masajid they have halaqa for the local ethnicity. So the Turks can have their halaqa, the Indonesians can have theirs, and the Malaysians or the you know the Somalis can have theirs while they're part of the larger community. So they didn't break off and go somewhere else. They're holding it right there. So I think that's a really cool feature of some masajid that they acknowledge that need also,
Mhm.
because you can't just replace all of that culture and that heritage with just okay, we're going to do everything in English.
That's
And
true.
it's also you can't be blind to the English. You know, it used to be a time
Mhm.
when I would go give a khutbah, and I would give the khutbah in English, and some of the older gentlemen would come up to me, "لما لم تخطب بالعربية?" Why didn't you give the
Uh,
khutbah in Arabic? هذه لغة الإسلام فأنت
yeah.
تخطب ولا تستعمل لغة الإسلام. So
Mhm.
you're using Arabic, you're not using the language of Islam. Why are you giving khutbah in English? And I would say, انظروا إلى الشباب, like look at the youth. هؤلاء لا يفهمون العربية. They don't
Yeah.
understand Arabic. وأنا أهتم بهم أكثر. And I'm
Yeah.
more concerned with them. وللمسلمين الجدد and the new Muslims that are here. لأنهم أحق. They have more right,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So they would. So I would. That used to be a discussion, but it's no longer a discussion. That's no longer, for the most part, that's not
Yeah.
really the way we think. We think about, okay, how do we appeal to and how do we send a message to all of the community? So that's certainly one, I think, very positive experience that I benefit from. And, you know, when I go to different countries and the khutbah is in their local language,
Mhm.
I actually respect that and appreciate that a lot. I go to Malaysia and the khutbah is in Malayo, and I'm
Mhm.
not annoyed that it's not in English or in Arabic.
Yeah.
It should be in Malayo because the majority of the people sitting there, that's what they understand. So you
Exactly.
should be talking to them. And then the khutbah in Turkey should be in Turkish, and the khutbah in Pakistan should be in Urdu. The same way the
Yeah.
khutbah in America should be in English,
Mhm.
right? So
Mhm. Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly, exactly. So I'm sure that you can understand a lot from the ayah or hadith mentioned in Arabic from the khutbah.
right.
Qadr
You try to string it
Nouman.
together yourself. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So let me dive in at this point, and I would like to ask a specific question. I want to give us example of a practice you have seen from um, a Muslim community, for example, the Arab community, the Turkish community, for example, the Indian, and you liked it, whether it's like an action, like a specific type of celebrating, maybe food, maybe anything that you like, behavior, maybe something like specific. Could you give me an example
I
of this?
like what I like the most about any community that they do specifically
Mhm.
is when they understand two dynamics. And you could see it plays out in different ways, but it's always the same two things. The the masjid is supposed to reinforce family values, right? And the masjid is supposed to be a great place for the entire family. And the family is supposed to develop a connection with the masjid. Like there's a
Exactly.
symbiotic relationship.
Mhm,
What
mhm.
happened in many places in the world, even in America, actually, many places in America, is the masjid is a place for men and then more and more older men. And that's it. And sometimes
Uh-huh.
it's a place for men and women and generally older women. But kids are being forced to come there. Kids are like being dragged to the masjid. And even when they're being
Mm,
dragged, they're playing in the back. They're not enjoying themselves. They're like, you know, they're
yeah.
just sitting with their friends goofing off or whatever.
Mhm.
The masjid is supposed to be a place that you can truly enjoy coming to, and there's something meaningful and rich for every segment of the population. The seniors love coming there. The youth love coming there. The kids love coming. The teenagers love coming there. And you cannot develop a plan for that if you don't understand what they want. Right. So, for example, in
Exactly.
America, for example, basketball is a huge part of the culture. Right. And a place like Michigan, which is super cold, it's hard to play basketball outdoors because it's snowing and freezing, or
Yeah, yeah.
So, for example, a great masjid in Detroit, in IAGD, Islamic Association of Greater Detroit, you could find pictures of them and stuff. They built this 25 years ago, the massive basketball gymnasium inside the masjid. So youth are coming and they're playing their sports, and then the adhan goes off, and then they're going to pray. But you didn't call them to the prayer, you call them to basketball.
Yeah.
Right. And they're doing, there's barbecues being held, there's bazaars being held, there's activity that draws a population. That's what interests them. And then the prayer becomes an effortless part of their experience. I love seeing that. I don't like to see a masjid which is people only enter into its zone when it's salah time. But actually, my understanding of our religion is that salah was a seamless infusion into life. It's stitched into life. So if you're at the office, for example, working, and it's prayer time, I love what the Malaysians have done. For example, there's a prayer room in every office building. There's a surah in every office building. Because you could just take the elevator down and pray and then come back up. You're not leaving and going 20 minutes to walk to a masjid and then you're going to pray and then come back. And now you lost an hour and a half of your workday because you wanted to pray in Jama'ah.
Exactly.
Right? That wasn't supposed to be the case. What was supposed to be the case was prayer just fits with your activity. So a lot of masjids have done an after-school program to help kids with their homework, a sports program, right? Community education, like women are learning crafts, or even app development or something like that at the masjid. And there was one masjid that asked me for some suggestions the other day, and I said, hey, one of the best things you can do, I think, is create a podcast studio and let the teenagers and the college students use it for their own content, because content creation is the new obsession for youth, right? Give them a space to do that in the masjid and guide them. And now they're doing something they love doing, but they associate that with this place, right? So that's the kind of strategy I really, really like. One other cool thing I'll tell you is there was a lot of times where people bring their little kids to the prayer, right?
Yeah.
And those kids start crying, fighting, all this other stuff, right? And so one of the masajids, I really love this. The Irving Masjid did this. I think the Epic Masjid has also done this. They have the musalla, and in the back of the musalla, they have a glass wall. And behind the glass wall, they have another musalla. It's a glass room, right? And it's soundproof. And the dads that come with their little kids, they can go in that room and pray, join the prayer. And those kids can write on the walls, they can jump around, they can do whatever they want in there. It's all good. And so they don't get to miss the prayer, and they don't get to miss the prayer. And I think something similar should happen for women too. A lot of times women try to go to the masjid, it looks like a daycare in the women's section. And there's babies crying and kids crawling and women that want to have a quiet prayer experience can't do it. But if you separated the two and said, hey, this is women with children, and they should have a quality experience too. You shouldn't put them in a corner somewhere. You put them where they can also enjoy the prayer, they can see the ongoings, and then you have a separate room, a separate space for women that are not with kids. I think it would just enhance the experience,
Exactly. That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So these things I really, really like.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, it's really interesting. I mean, we should take notes and apply it. We try to apply this here in
Yeah.
okay, inshallah.
Also, like I think I like to meet people where they are. So, I mean, this is a little bit unorthodox, but I've tried some of these things myself and they work. So what I did, for example, was I taught kids the story of Musa alayhi salam, right? And I taught it from the Quran. Like there was a group of kids, they were like 6 years old to 15 years old. And I taught the story of Musa alayhi salam over 3-4 weeks. I was like, okay, now you know the story. Now let's watch Disney's Prince of Egypt. Okay, so then we watched the Prince of Egypt. Which is the Disney production of the life of Moses, right? And I would literally pause every 30, 40 seconds and say, was that true? And they'd say, no, that's not what happened. This is what actually happened. They messed this up. Then I'd go 30, 40 seconds. And in the middle of the movie, the kids would start protesting. No, that's not what happened. That's not what happened. And so now we're correcting Disney
exactly
through the entire, and even the parents that were sitting there watching were like, I actually made them watch this because I thought it was good. They're learning about Moses. They're learning about Musa. I was like, yeah, they weren't, right? But it's fantastic for kids to connect what they learn with the outside world and how the world sees these things, and to see how the deen is commenting on the world outside of ourselves, right? So I used to have a regular movie night with kids, and we'd watch part of a movie, and then I'd interview them in the middle of the movie. I'd hit pause and say, hey, so like it was a scene of some kid being bullied in school. He's running from the other kids. He's hiding. And so I paused it. Did this ever happen to any of you? And kids start raising their hand. And the parents were in the back and they were shocked because they never told them. And now they're telling their story. Yeah, they ran after me and I was hiding, and then they found me, and then they made fun of me. They pushed me around. They called me this and they called me that. And I was like, wow, that's horrible. So the entire formula to me is give people a space where they can express themselves.
Exactly.
And this is the same way when I'm saying when you create a podcast studio, it's not a lot of times we think of education as we got to tell them this, we got to tell them this, we got to tell them. No, what about listening, right? If we create a space where people can be heard, then we are in a much better position to have meaningful conversation with them, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, here in our school, we have something which we call the sahur cafe. Cafe, it means like a place where students come together to drink tea, to drink coffee, to have conversations. If someone of the responsible of this cafe is listening, why not trying a movie night like the one Brother Nouman had with the students? Okay, take note, gentlemen, and let's see what will you do, inshallah. So, briefly, I want to ask you about the challenges that Muslim communities face during Ramadan. Is there any social, political, maybe nothing, something else challenges in Ramadan they face?
Not so much. I mean, I'm not to be honest with you, I'm so minimally involved now in the American scene. And I'm in fact, even now I'm in England. I'm not even in America. I'm in Manchester.
I see.
So yeah, I spend about 6 months out of my year in the United States. But to me,
the time zone, for example, I don't know, maybe because the United States is spread over like 5 hours, 6 hours.
You guys are 6:30. I'm 3:30 right now, but they're probably 10:30 a.m. or something like that. To me, the big challenge of Ramadan is that we, as a whole, as a Muslim civilization, this is going to sound controversial, but I actually believe this to be true. I believe we have missed out on the fundamental purpose of Ramadan. The fundamental purpose of Ramadan was to reintroduce ourselves to the Quran meaningfully. And the month of Ramadan has become the month of Quran recitation without contemplation.
Exactly.
So it's actually it's become, we celebrate the most beautiful recitation. We have how many khatams did you do?
Exactly. The quantity.
It's quantitative. And instead of having, okay, here's a 10-year Ramadan plan for a 6-year-old, that at the age of 6, their Ramadan, we're going to give them this much education of the Quran, which we're going to build on until next Ramadan, and then boost it in Ramadan, and then build on. And then by the time this boy or girl is 13 or 14 years old, they've actually had a journey through the entire Quran. They know meaningfully what the entire Quran is about, right? Now, we can't even say that for most of the adults in the Muslim world, right? But it's so realistic, it's so attainable to get that goal, because people are focused on Ramadan. They're focused on that month. So I think everywhere where prayers are being held, everywhere Taraweeh is being held, even if you take out 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and you have a plan, hey, this year we're going to go through all of Surah Al-Baqarah. This next year we're going to go through all of Surah Al Imran. It's not quality. It's not quantity, it's quality, right? But you're engaging in discussion. You're telling people, even the youth, you're telling them, hey, read this ayah to this ayah and bring your questions. And we're going to discuss these ayat tomorrow. And we're going to discuss the next ayat tomorrow, and the next ayat tomorrow, and the next ayat tomorrow, right? And every day before Taraweeh starts, you have a little bit of a discussion. And then at the end, you have a coffee and a discussion, an open QA like that. So it's instead of, we can create a culture where Quran is the conversation. And that should be the case. Ramadan is a time more than any other time where the Quran should be the conversation. And that's simply not the case for the most part. We're doing everything with the Quran except engaging with it meaningfully.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Sometimes I saw some people like reading Quran for like to finish the khitmah. They read the page, then they stop and they don't really just look at the page, like line by line, to reflect the meanings, because the first reading was like to recite the page, which was, I mean, good practice. So now I would like to take from you last tip, like I want from you a practical, so our students can apply. Now our students are watching, parents, maybe graduates. So something that you advise, practical tip they can do in Ramadan, which benefits them and benefits you, since it's
so
like
like
ilmun sadaqah jariyah
you're in the
for you as well.
you're in the education field, so you know no two students are the same, right? Students are at different levels of aptitude, and students are also
That's
different
true.
levels of motivation. So I can give, if I give advice to a serious student who's already motivated and they want to do more, that's a very different kind of advice. And if I'm giving advice to a student that's just not finding themselves motivated, they're not interested, that's a very different kind of advice. And
That's true.
if I give the same advice, the student that needs motivation, I give them that advice, and I give the same advice to the serious student, I'm hurting the serious student because the serious student needed something more, you know?
Yeah.
And if I give the serious student advice to the weaker student or the student that's unmotivated, I'm hurting the unmotivated student. So in my mind, I think you have to first see yourself, be honest with yourself. Where are you in this journey? Right. And I mean, my advice is limited to your journey through the Quran. That's what my work is about. So all I can tell you is that if you don't find yourself motivated to learn about the Quran or to engage with it more, it doesn't really interest you, or you don't really see the point, something like that, then I think you need some more, give this a shot. Like I did a couple of courses that were just meant for that kind of an audience. And Story Night is one of them. And Divine Speech is another one. Just even an outsider can come and listen and say, hey, why should you even pay attention to this book? Why should you even, okay, we're Muslim, got it. But that's not enough for many teenagers, right? So here's something I want you to kind of engage with and see if that piques your interest. Now, quickly, I'll give advice to the serious students that say, hey, I really want to understand the Quran better. And I want to have a meaningful education in the Quran. I want to be able to be knowledgeable in the Quran. The first advice I'll give you is quality over quantity always with the Quran. So I say you memorize a surah, and whatever surah you're memorizing is also a surah you're studying. And I don't just mean you're reading a translation, you're studying that surah. If you want to take advantage of my work, I've done brief lectures on all the surahs on the Quran, and I've done detailed lectures on many of the surahs of the Quran. So maybe it's one of those surahs where I've done a detailed lecture series. So listen to that lecture series while you're memorizing that surah. And if you're even more serious, you're studying Arabic, don't wait till you finish studying Arabic to study the Quran. You're studying Arabic, you're memorizing the surah, and you're engaging it with that one particular surah all at the same time. This is the fastest way that you can make progress. If you could do this with one surah, the second surah you engage with will be not even 50% of the work. And the third surah you engage with will not even be 20% of the work. Right? So
Exactly. That's true.
the workload will exponentially drop immediately. And you'll see yourself engaging with the Quran meaningfully very, very, very quickly because you followed a formula. but that's memorization, study, and Arabic. Like if you can combine these three things, then it doesn't take years. It literally takes months. And you're going to have a very meaningful, rich relationship with the Quran. Even if you're not advanced in your Arabic, you'll become more and more advanced in your Quran studies, which will help your Arabic anyway.
Exactly.
Inshallah.
Okay. Dear brother Nouman, thank you very much, and Jazakallah khairan for this conversation. I hope it is beneficial and useful for all of us, all of our students, graduates, and parents here in the Kartal Anatolian Imam Hatib High School. We want to have you one day, maybe if you come to Istanbul.
That'd be fun.
Like to have this conversation in face to face. I hope that one day it will be true.
Very cool.
And Ramadan Mubarak.
Ramadan
for
Mubarak to
all
you.
of you. تقبل الله العظيم. See you soon إن شاء الله.
See you soon,
السلام
inshallah.
عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. تقبل الله.
تقبل الله.